We've got a 2000 Honda Foreman ES four-wheeler today, and it's just not starting. We picked this up. The machine is in great condition, very, very clean, but it turns over just fine. The battery's well charged. The plastics aren't beat up. There's no cracks. There's no rips in the seats. The tires look decent. It's just not starting. So I'm going to go through a couple things. We're going to check first. We're actually going to take and resell this four-wheeler. We bought it knowing that it didn't run and just planned on doing possibly a carb clean. They did say that it leaked fuel. I opened up the gas cap there. There's fuel in it, and the fuel is still on. That tells me that probably our fuel petcock is bad, not allowing fuel in, or our float is stuck on our carburetor. I've done several videos on carb cleans on this 450 model. Check those out on our channel. I just wanted to go through a couple things we're going to test. Turns over so well, kind of makes me think that maybe there's not spark. Turns over quick, doesn't sound like it's even trying at all. The fact that there's fuel in there, the fact that at one time it leaked fuel. Okay, we're going through that carburetor. I also wanted to check that fuel filter that sits underneath this panel, as well as the fuel tank there, to make sure that we were actually getting fuel to flow through those fuel lines. I pulled that fuel filter off. This is not the stock one. This is much larger than what needs to be there. So I'm going to go ahead and just take that one off of there, replace it with an OEM filter there. But I am going to pull this tank because I got a little concern. When I pulled this fuel line down here and I stuck a cup underneath of it, I turned that fuel on, no fuel came out, which tells me probably that fuel petcock is completely gummed up and jammed up. Based off of that carburetor there, we've got some fuel that's been sitting in there for quite some time. So I removed a clip that was here, and there's two 10mm bolts here. Up here there's a clip, and on the other side there's a clip. So now what you got to do is pull this off of here, and then you can pull this up. Now we've got the fuel tank cap removed, and pull it up like that, and you can see underneath of there is a Phillips screw, and you will have to remove that Phillips screw to pull this panel off. Or the other thing that you can do is go to the other side. That panel and everything will come off all together, which is the route that we're going to do, because I think we're going to end up pulling that fuel tank anyway. On this other side here, we're going to go ahead and remove these two 10mm bolts here. There's a black tab up here. This tab could actually stay, because if we're pulling all this off together, this center cover here is held on with this black tab. And I have both of those screws removed. This tab up here is going to have to be removed because it holds that front fender and that center panel together there. And pull it up with a flat screwdriver or a pair of side dikes. Just pry it up like that. They also make clips specific, or tools to specifically remove those plastic clips out of there. Now we've got that center panel completely off. We're going to set that aside. Now we've got our fuel tank here. A rubber strap here that you just pry off of there. Set that aside. We've got two 10mm bolts up top here, and sometimes you got to turn that handlebar to get to those. Now I've got a long extension here, so we don't have to turn the handlebars too far to get this off of here. I think this extension's plenty long, I would say. We've got a strap on this other side, just like on that side there, and then this fuel tank is ready to come off. You do have a fuel hose that'll run alongside the bottom there, so keep that in mind as you start removing this. I also like to remove these bolts, so if you tip that tank upside down or something, you don't have that screw getting lost. You got to pull back a little bit, so to do that, you got to lift it above this duct here, and then you just slide it back just like that, out from underneath that fender there. Be careful of your fuel hose. We are obviously, like I said, replacing this one, but I don't want to break the fuel petcock off of there. So we'll take and set this on the bench. I'll actually flip it upside down and show you inside there. We have our fuel tank here. We've got a damper that's supposed to sit a little bit differently than it was, so we'll fix that. We've got two dampers up here that just kind of rubber seals that kind of hold that in place. I'm actually going to tip this up now. And we've got some parts in there that shouldn't be in there. So I'm guessing it's part of the fuel level assembly. Okay, we're going to flip this fuel tank up now. I'm going to pull this bottom petcock off of here. You can pull this valve off as well, which we probably will do that. but I just need to see inside here to make sure that that fuel is coming through or can come through that petcock there. All right, we have both screws off of there, and you can see why that fuel is not pulling through there. We've got some serious buildup and corrosion here. We'll clean that all out. We'll clean this fuel tank, wash it out really well. And then actually this fuel petcock, I'm guessing, is gonna be good once it's all cleaned up. Sometimes it gets bad enough to where it kind of disintegrates, falls apart. That's not the case here. We'll go through that now at this time. Boy, that is some stinky stuff. Trying to clean all that out as much as possible. Trying to figure out if there's like a chunk of mud in here because it keeps on having a whole bunch of... They've got a lip inside here, so it's extremely difficult to actually... Fuel tank that we set here. We're actually going to flip this over now. I'm going to put this back together. I had pulled that fuel petcock, if you remember, on one of my videos. I showed you what kind of dirt and debris. I think somebody had shoved old apples down in the fuel tank for whatever reason. They just look like old apples, and that was some nasty smelling fuel and pretty much destroyed that carburetor. Okay, we've got our fuel petcock here. We've got an O-ring that we're going to take and seal it up, use to seal up there. I got a little bit of grease I'm going to put around this area here. You could put it directly onto the seal, and I'll actually put a little bit on there. That just kind of helps that sit into place there. If you've got a dry spot on that seal or on that tank there, that just helps it seal. It also kind of helps it hold into place there. I'm going to set that fuel petcock right on there. And then we've got a couple spacers. You want to make sure that those are in position there. And then our 8mm screws there. We'll snug both of these up. Spacers on that fuel tank just kind of center that O-ring and everything there. Make sure it's in the right position. Now I'm going to set this back on the four-wheeler. Now before I go completely all the way down, I'm actually going to take my fuel line here and run it as long as we need to run it there. I'm going to put a new fuel filter in there. I've got some fuel line here that I'm going to use. I'm going to take the clamps off of the old line because those clamps are still good. Make sure it's cleaned off. Make sure you got a big enough fuel line. Sometimes what I've seen is people will try to put too small of a line on there. Well, then what happens is they try to push it on and it'll actually crack that fuel line, and then it'll start leaking right off the bat before you even get the four-wheeler running. So take and run that down into place there. Okay, this is a damper. Just kind of keeps things from rattling. It actually sits underneath of the fuel tank, just like this. Kind of wraps around here. I don't know that it's completely necessary, but we've got it again, so let's put it on. There's actually little tabs on either side of your frame to hook that on. And there's also rubber straps, and I'll show you on that side there. Here's the tab on the frame for this piece. Kind of helps hold that fuel tank into place there. And then you've got your strap that'll sit right there. You also have some bolts up front there that you want to get into place there. All right, we're going to put some fuel in the fuel tank. Before we get too far, we're just going to make sure we're getting fuel down, as we had quite a bit of debris in that fuel tank before. So we got the fuel in it now, and I'm going to actually put this air filter on before we get too terrible far. Got the filter on there. I'm going to go ahead and tighten up that clamp. Okay, we'll put the lid on, that fuel on. Probably will need to adjust that idle some. I don't like to do that until I get it warmed up, but it appears to be really, really low. So I'm actually just going to turn it up, and we'll have to adjust it more precise later. But it really started up and ran just spectacular. So look at that. Good running four-wheeler. So that's a carburetor that we've gone through completely clean. Just so you can hear me, I'm going to shut that off. We'll fire it up and get it going again here in a little bit once we get all the plastics back on. And we'll take it for a little drive. Just double checking, make sure there's no leaks in there. I'm going to go ahead and put that top cover on the fuel tank here. Before I do that, actually, remember we've got two screws on the front of that fuel tank. That'll be easier to do those now. All right, now we can take and slide this cover on. Got a couple tabs that we're gonna have to slide in there. Get that over the top cover there, or that fuel tank. Dirt or debris getting in there. You gotta remember to get a vent hose for this. It's important to have that on there so that we don't get water in there if this four-wheeler sits outside. We have some tabs over here and a handful of 10mm bolts. And then I'll come around to that other side there and do the same thing. We've got a couple 10mm bolts we've got to put in over here. We're actually going to pull this down. I'll get it pictured and we'll get it listed for sale. This is a extremely clean Honda Foreman. All right, we've got this Honda Foreman 450 ES. It's electric shift, obviously electric start. Running good, no issues there. Tires are in great shape. Full-time four-wheel drive, digital dash with 618 original miles on it. So this thing is in top shape, shifts well, runs well, serviced and ready to go. If you've got questions or comments, make sure and leave those below. I appreciate you guys watching this video.